All right, keep your feedback coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. We're all trying to get a solution to this unrest in schools. We don't have any silver bullet, but together we can definitely come up with something. So, Mudhoni, there's this issue that's coming up on discipline. Some people are advocating for the return of the cane. Would that help?
No, I always say, if you cannot cane your child, stop asking the teacher to cane your child for you. Let it begin with you. Cane them thoroughly, and the teacher will not need to do that. So if parents took up their responsibility, we would not be asking teachers to be caning their children in school. Because again, that is not the work that has been given to teachers. Teachers are governed by a code of ethics from the Teacher Service Commission that does not allow them to cane people's children. Yeah. So, and really when you look at the school setup, I am happy for one viewer who has told us that we are being very simplistic about, problems that are very deep. And maybe, when you look at a classroom, for example, we want to make an admission here that in most of the public secondary schools and even primary schools, you will find that the children have occupied the whole space up to, palembele. There are no even rows where the teacher can now, roam inside the classroom and really interact and get to know what the learners are doing. So the teacher is only left to stand at the front, and he can never or she can never quite get to know what these other children are doing. So it's really overstretching for us to imagine that with the kind of population that is there in the schools, a teacher is handling 70 children, for example, in Form 1. Yeah. It is really overstretching the teacher for us to again ask them to be in charge of the discipline of those very learners. When will they teach? When will they mark? When will they do so much? So I think our problems are bigger. Yeah. And when we will start discussing, like for example, you were talking about the audit question. Yeah. To just illustrate to you that the ministry has just been running freely. It's like the education sector has been on a free mode. Their own schools, when they are doing the registration of the school, a certain school has a certificate to have, for example, maybe 800 learners. But as we speak, the same certificate, the same facilities, the learners are 3,000. Where does the Ministry of Education get strength, therefore, to go and supervise what is happening in private schools and actually closing down some of them that have not met some of these regulations, that their own schools have not met? Okay. What happened to advising yourself? That last year we saw, because we always see the minister when the Form 1's admission is happening. And if these principals, I really sympathize with them because they cannot come here and discuss issues as we are discussing because they are employees of the same government, so therefore they cannot criticize their own government. But when you know very well that a school has got a capacity of, say, admitting 200 Form 1's, and you go ahead and issue them with 300 Form 1's, what are you expecting? How are you expecting that school will handle that 100? And this is information that you have. So then you're waiting for a riot like this so that you can commission a task force to find out why there are problems in our schools. But you knew it. You did not advise yourselves that, oh, look, people, we are growing by this particular percentage, and so we are thinking that we will need this kind of infrastructure. So I think really the Ministry of Education is also not, and I'm saying this because we saw here in Nairobi, when the NMS was put up, we do not know where this government got resources to put up hospitals in each and every slum. So I know that this country has got resources. And sometimes it's so sad that I have to say this. It took this country post-election violence for us to gift ourselves a constitution. Are our children doing something so that we can wake up from our slumber? So that we can be incited enough to know that surely we have a crisis in our education sector. Yeah. And if we don't do something right now, like we did not do something with this information that we got in 2016 when 100 schools went up in flames. Yeah. And we still said we blame it on congestion. We blame it on boarding schools. Here we are in 2021 having the same conversation. God forbid that we will have this same conversation in 2030 and we will still be looking at the same statistics as we are looking at. In Nairobi, the 230 primary schools that we had, 205 primary schools that we had in 1990 are the same public primary schools that we are having today. It is not nice, it is not acceptable, and we need to start holding our government to account by what are you serious about education? Yes, we have added XYZ number of brand new secondary schools and brand new primary schools to take care of the population that we think about. Otherwise, Trevor, I can guarantee you, in 2030, we will be looking at a worse crisis because Form 1s are again in March. I think we will gift ourselves a brand new cohort of Form 1s. and there will be more than the ones that we took last year.
Yeah.
Where is the space? What is the expansion? Do we throw it to Akina Indimuli for them to figure out with the parents? We continue to tax the same parents whose businesses went down during COVID. The same pressure the parent is having is the same pressure they transfer to their children. That wewe ndio unabeba pesa yote, sasa hakuna pesa. It's not nice. Let government get its act in order and let us really invest in brand new schools and infrastructure in our public institutions.
All right. Echesa, how do we deal with the indiscipline issue? The suggestions of corporal punishment.
One, I think we are overstretching the meaning of corporal punishment. We need to define what punishment amounts to corporal punishment. What the Basic Education Act and the Constitution bans is the corporal punishment. That punishment which is likely to cause harm on a learner. Trevor, a few slaps here and there, a few strokes of cane to Form 1s to Form 4s is not corporal punishment. And perhaps it is time to relax our legislative and policy framework and involve teachers in disciplining learners reasonably without getting repercussions from the ministry and the Teacher Service Commission. Today, you reprimand a learner, not even beating or slapping, just telling the learner, whatever you're doing is stupid. You will go home. You are likely to be punished by TSC because we have overstretched the definition of what amounts to corporal punishment. And then perhaps it is time to also invoke the criminal justice system in dealing with these learners. And the law is very clear. Our penal code at section 14 says the age of criminal responsibility is 8 years. Is only a child who is below 8 years that is presumed by law to be unable to form the criminal element of committing a crime. A child who is 12 years old is capable of committing a crime if you demonstrate that he had the right mind and he knew what he was doing. But anything beyond the age of 13 years, these are fellas who can go through the criminal justice system like any other person. If they burn schools, they can be taken to court for malicious damage to property. If they kill, they'll be judged with murder. The only slight difference is that they'll be imprisoned under the president's pleasure if they were to be found guilty. Why should we guard our children in school like eggs until the age of 18 and release them to corporal punishment throughout their lifetime? What is easier? We spare the rod, we spoil the child. And the African philosophy says that the intelligence of an African child is in the buttocks. If you don't deal with them while they're growing, then they're going to grow into very useless persons.
Do you agree with that statement?
Before the law was changed, the issue of indiscipline in schools was even more dangerous than we are discussing now. I want to take you back to Changuli disaster, Bombolulu again, St. Kizito, you know, and corporal punishment was the cause of those very severe issues. And psychologists have sat over this, and decades of people who run other schools and in other countries, a lot of research is out there. That is a very simplistic interpretation of what corporal punishment is. And I want to just support what Modoni is saying, that the parents have a responsibility for their children. All discipline starts from home. It does not start at school.
Yeah.
The interpretation of corporal punishment that my colleague Echesa is implying, it means that discipline starts at school. It doesn't. It starts at home. And any person who is where they are in their lives will testify that most of us do, you know, any child will behave well knowing that behavior is not tolerated at home.
Yeah.
If it is tolerated at home, then that behavior goes. I don't believe, and this is my personal perspective as somebody who runs a school as well, that teachers are tied by the law. Because corporal punishment in itself and in its application in school is very, very clear. It is a very limited, you know, slapping, hitting, you know, that physical injury of a child, infliction of pain, that is what we discuss as corporal punishment in the school setting. And I am firmly in the, as somebody who has once been beaten and a finger cracked, I truly believe it was not necessary for failing maths. I didn't need to be beaten for failing maths. I needed to be better taught. monitoring it, if it were to come back, would be another nightmare altogether that is not worth. And one of the viewers actually stated it. It would contribute to turning schools into even a more, into a prison setting, so that kind of thing. And anybody who understands education pre the law change in 2000, I think it was changed in 2000, 2001, can testify to how terrible for some kids schools were.
Yeah.
Frightening. They were frightening places where anybody could hit you at any time and you didn't necessarily know what you are being hit for. We went through a system where you were beaten for not performing. The root cause was never addressed. So if people then ascribe their success to being beaten for not passing an exam rather than for doing anything wrong, that direction of corporal punishment is not one that I think we should be having here. When you look at even the incidences that we are discussing today, there are about 5, 6, 7 schools that have had this issue. We are over 8,000 secondary schools. Are we actually positioning this discussion correctly in the first place? When you have 5 to 7, 8 schools that have reached, that we know of, I'm sure Mheshimiwa here knows the actual detail of what is happening in our schools. And then we use those 5, 6, 7, 8 to craft a national discussion on discipline, and then we are saying bring back corporal punishment. Really?
So it's a minority?
We are a very, significant minority.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was listening to Madam here very keenly because she was bringing out a very serious point in terms of research and data and the statistical framework that would be basing on. But back to your issue of corporal punishment, and before I get to that, the teachers are able also to criticize themselves. One of the teachers is saying that because of the pressure from the ministry and TAC and the ranking that I talked about, there's too much work being given to students.
Yeah.
And he's told me to speak on this, that there's work for weekend, there's work for everything, there's work for afternoon, and so on. So they also think that it's high time the ministry looked at which type of work needs to be given to students so that there's not too much work.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the 100% transition in the concession schools, and I think Mudhoni talked about it, so that is another challenge that is in our schools today and which is creating pressure to our students. Corporal punishment, I would speak with two voices, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The first one would be for the people who believe in it and who believe in the biblical statement that spare the rod and you spoil the child. Yeah. That corporal punishment, well, I don't think is a solution now. Things have really changed. And we have really moved our students from a level of beating them. Unfortunately, they are the ones who are now beating the teachers and cutting the teachers' hands and actually inflicting pain on the teachers. But I think there could be a better way if put to people and the public participation on how we can deal with the discipline. But corporal punishment may not be the best thing to bring back, because schools were places where when I reported, or when you reported, you would be fearful of a certain teacher who is known to be very serious on corporal punishment and can really inflict serious injury on you. Yeah. I don't think we want to go there. Teachers have really risen through the times. And from the union point of view, if you were to bring corporal punishment, I may be asking for extra charges for teachers to do corporal punishment, because this discipline is basically supposed to be not only just for the teacher. Yeah. And teachers are not trained just to cane and beat people. They are just trained to insert and give information of education to students, not beat them up. And that brings me to something else which a teacher talked about. Yeah. That why are we leaving students with teachers to handle, he called it, or she called it, this service industry of hoteliering, that we are cooking, we are serving, we are washing. You know, teachers were never trained. I'm a teacher. We were never trained anything in service industry. But when you become a teacher, you now become the service industry master of menu. It came from a teacher this morning, and I said this marvelous. So, no corporal punishment. I think we have outlived corporal punishment.
Trevor, I think I have a right of reply to my colleague panelists. One, we are misunderstanding, in my opinion, what corporal punishment ought to be. All we are saying is that let us give school administrators, let us give teachers power to address discipline issues without interference from other stakeholders such as parents, the ministry, and the commission. Today, it is almost impossible to exclude a student who has burnt down a school. The process of expulsion is as difficult as the joke is not as passing BBI. It's so difficult and complicated. You have tried that at the student. You have to summon the board 2-3 times, the full board, go to the county education board, which sits up once or twice a month or even in 3 months, and then come back, then take the commissions to Jogo, and the year is gone. Such that students who are known to be indisciplined, students who are smoking bunk, students who are using illicit brews in schools, students who are fighting teachers cannot be disciplined. And once you make an attempt to discipline these students, the ministry will come for you. Teacher service will come for you. So the principal's hands are tied. Teachers' hands are tied. How do we expect teachers to properly administer discipline, including suspensions and expulsions of students who are indisciplined and have been proven to be indisciplined in schools without giving them power?
Discipline, I think there's a difference between discipline and punish. To discipline is not, to punish is not to discipline. That's the concept here, and I think he needs to really...
A punishment is a form of discipline. Suspension is a form of punishment.
There's that thing these days. That's why soon I'm even advising that cell phones will be in schools as part of the learning, just like a calculator.
Correct.
Corporal punishment is an intentional use of physical force to cause bodily pain or discomfort as a penalty for unacceptable behavior. Corporal punishment includes actions like spanking, hitting, slapping, pinching, ear pinching. So there's no any definition that we don't know about. This is the definition of corporal punishment.
Yes, correct.
And you quickly need to go to the law. When the Children's Act 2001 was done, these inclusions are there. Teachers are not allowed to use this. So as we speak now, unless we want to make policy or another law, because the teachers must work also within a framework of law. These are the things that they were told not to do. So we cannot go this direction until when we do a legislative framework again to change to amend the Children's Act. And I think it's undergoing amendment now. So as we talk about corporal punishment, maybe it's a wishful thing that we return it. But I'm telling you that most of the teachers are also not very comfortable spanking. And the society has also really changed. I don't know, but you look like you are younger than me. Why would you want to spank, kick, slap, hit a student in public? When now we are also talking about issues of dignified treatment of everyone. You do the same even to your own wife, and we just take you to the courts. So you want the teachers to do that to the children? I'm sorry, but I think that's what I want to submit.
All right. So, this is not going to end. In fact, I want us to switch into something else. Now, you were talking about infrastructural issues earlier on. There's an audit report that was given by the Auditor General, and they audited 42 schools in 5 different counties. None of them were adhering to the set procedure that was brought up in 2008 of how to ensure that at least learners can escape a fire incident. Dormitory doors to open outwards, not inwards. None of that is happening. Windows not to be grilled, most of them are still grilled. Distance of 1.2 meters between learners, there's not there. The triple decker that you're talking about was not supposed to be there. The schools still have them. What is the problem in this institution?
And I think when I saw that audit report, it really took me to what we have been talking about, really. And sometimes when we have these kinds of discussions, let's not discuss for the sake of being seen like you're supporting government. I think that is not the point entirely. The point here is let us critique ourselves for the sake of improving. Let me ask, the Ministry of Education has got the Quality Assurance and Standard Department fully financed and human resourced. They are not aware. They are not aware. For example, they visit schools. But what do they do when they visit schools? I categorically want to say here that they never visit the dorms, they visit the principal. Yes, they visit the principal's office and live there with an envelope. That is the point of the matter. Read the Cleo Minde report. It is saying that when they went round, they found that the principal will give you the standards manual. They have the safety manual. But the dorms have not been painted as they're supposed to be painted. The Minde report says that some of the learners they interviewed said, we want to burn down this dormitory so that they can build a new one. It boils down to some of these issues that we are talking about. And to say that the Ministry of Education has had all the opportunities, all the information, being that they are the ones who are admitting these learners, so they have the numbers. Being that they are the custodians of all these standards. And the officers go down every day, do they return some of these reports? So that it is not an investigation that is now coming from there. Can you imagine what an insult that the Auditor General is the one who is now revealing some of these things? Yet you have officers of the Ministry of Education up to the ground level, up to the school level. You have officers of the Ministry of Education. Yeah. The idea is, Trevor, let people get serious. Education sector is so important to be ran as casually as we are seeing, right now. And the whole other question is, we are not going to stop school fires by having windows opening inside out, or that is not it.
Yeah.
That is not it. You cannot have triple deckers and children sleeping. They are unhappy. This is not how they sleep in their own places. Let us also listen to these children.
Yeah.
And also, let us democratize a little bit. And here, the Ministry of Education again. Remember, we had this conversation a while back, where you take your child to school for Form 1 admission, but you're not allowed into the dormitory, whether by design or by default. You don't get inside the dormitory. And I challenged parents and I asked them, by the time you leave your child, you should be comfortable that you have left them in a space where, because some of us are the ones who are even giving pressure to Alliance. I want my child here, I want visit. Go to that dormitory and see whether that is where you would want to leave your child. So that then when we are participating in some of these discussions, we also stop blaming the teachers who are really trying so hard to keep our children in schools, but in circumstances that are not really as human as we would want. Yeah. And all this is coming from pressure. So for me, I think the indictment is really out on the Ministry of Education. We cannot be sitting here and expecting a report from an auditor sitting somewhere, yet we have our officers all the way to the ground level. Where were they with this kind of information? Sometimes maybe some of this information can be forestalled. And also the question of payment. I had the issue of communication breakdown, for example. And we have the only people that need to be paid in schools for activities or transactions to happen in schools are not teachers only. There are other staff that are very important, such as cooks, the support staff. Have they been paid? There are some schools I know, they've gone without salary for 3 months or so. How then would you expect those kinds of people to support the school's administration? Because they look at themselves as people who are either victimized, they are not part of the system. Those are some of the challenges that I see that really need to be addressed. And also, let's start having a conversation of performance and asking our institutions, such as the Ministry of Education, what do you call performance? In your mind, what do you call performance? Is performance telling us that Parliament has given you how many billion? That is not performance. For us, performance is how have we, what are the indicators we are looking at? How have we expanded ourselves? How have we ensured that schools are adhering? And then, why would you go and close down a private school just because they do not have 2 or 3 more toilets that you would want? And your own institutions are death traps. The Ministry of the people working all over this quality assurance, harassing private schools for small things, yet themselves they are not visiting their own schools and giving schools verdicts. When did we ever see a public school closed for non-adhering to their own policies? Yet the auditor has to come from outside to tell us that all our schools have not adhered to. Why are they not all closed and rendered not fit for children to inhabit? Yet, as we speak now, I have about 80 private schools that have not been registered by the Ministry of Education. Why? Flimsy reasons that you do not have 2 toilets, you do not have, visit their own public institutions. 2,000 children using 8 toilets, and they want to threaten a private institution because they do not have 6 toilets. It's really double standard by the Ministry of Education.
Echesa, who's sleeping on the job?